All right, folks, welcome back to the show. It's HMW Sports Talk Live. I'm Craig Shelton. You can get me here every Saturday, that is, from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. If you tune in looking for me on Sundays, I'll be at church praising the Lord. You can count on that. This is my man Lance Zierlein from Sports Talk 790, the morning drive show over there from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. You can get him and Adam Clanton Monday through Friday on The Proper Gentleman of Sports Talk, one of my favorite shows in town. And I recommend that when you're in your ride, hitting up and down those highways Monday through Friday morning, you got to tune in to Sports Talk 790. That's on the AM dial if you spend your whole life listening to Mad Hatter. It's ridiculous, man. What do you think about that?
What do you think about the new station coming in?
I think that's
93.7 The Beat.
And by the way, you might want to let Indy Kalu know. I heard Indy say, I think that this is the first hip-hop station that Clear Channel has ever had. No, they kind of started 97.9 The Box.
I didn't know that. Clear Channel was 97.9 started on Clear Channel?
Yeah.
So Clear Channel owned 97.9 and then let it go. Who owns it right now?
Radio 1.
It's Radio 1?
Yeah, they're pretty.
For being a radio guy, I don't really care about all that radio stuff.
That
much.
I mean, you know me, I have to kind of
get stations, and other than that.
I mean, from my background and dealing with
no doubt.
Yeah, Clear Channel, definitely is well versed in the hip hop side of radio. Yeah, no doubt about that. Okay, all right. Hey, we mix it up a little bit. We have a little fun. We have no issues spreading it around, letting you know how diverse we are with our knowledge of what's happening in radio. And, of course, what you tuned in for tonight is Sports Talk. A couple of fires in the NFL that we want to talk about right now. Now, obviously, it was made official on yesterday, over at Reliance Stadium. Lance was there. I was there along with everybody else in Houston Sports Talk Media for the introduction of the new Texans head football coach, Bill O'Brien, who comes to us from Penn State University. And if you're not familiar with the name Bill O'Brien, he is touted as the number one guy as far as hot names. And every year you get these hot names. But I will say this about this particular hot name. This is a guy that has a respectable pedigree because he comes from that New England Patriots tree. Now, those coaches coming out of there has been well talked about, haven't had a whole lot of success that come from the quote-unquote Belichick tree. But I think this guy carries a little more cachet getting started, and it's a lot about what have you done for me lately. It's because of the situation at Penn State.
Yeah.
Now, Lamont Mann from HMW, one of our bloggers and one of the charter members of HoustonMediaWatch.com, wrote a blog last week telling the media that they needed to stop saying that Bill O'Brien, quote unquote, saved Penn State. We different opinions with that. When you say saved, I don't think the media meant he saved them in the true sense of the word. But Lamont's point was that he just maintained things. He stabilized things. And that's a very fair statement. That's a fair way to put it. But I don't think there's anyone in the media that just in conversation piece said, well, he saved Penn State, is ignorant of the fact that Penn State has been a pretty awesome program before Bill O'Brien. But I will say this. To go into that situation where nobody gave them a chance to be any good probably for the next 3 to 5 years, and to go in there and stabilize things, go in there and get one of, if not the top, quarterback recruit in the country to come there and play football, a kid who played well this year. I just think that a lot of the hype around Bill O'Brien, if it's not well-deserved, it's definitely well-crafted.
Yeah, I think he deserves hype for what he was able to do at Penn State, man. He didn't save the program. I mean, that's silly. But the expectations based on the amount of scholarships they lost, the fact that their starting running back Silas Redd went to USC, they lost their kicker to Texas, Anthony Farah. They lost one of their wide receivers. So the thought was they were going to take a big step back. I mean, that was a terrible scandal. It was the one of the all-time legends in college football, in football history, in football. Joe Paterno. You're talking about this is like a Lombardi type of Vince Lombardi type of figure in college football.
Our generations.
It really was, and he was linked to just one of the most horrific things. The most horrific thing I've ever heard about was sports, and for them to be able to take everything that we knew about Penn State and what was going on with Penn State, for him to be able to come in there, and you mentioned the word stabilize. I think it's a good word, and stabilize that rather than have them backslide.
Yeah.
I thought it was incredible. I watched their first game when they lost to Ohio, and I remember thinking, they're scrappy. That was at Penn State too, by the way. But they're losing to Ohio. I mean, this team's going to take a big step back. And when they ended up in the bowl game last year, and I watched how competitive they were, I thought, wow, man, what a great job by Bill O'Brien. He did it again this year. Were they one of the best teams in the Big Ten? No, they weren't one of the best teams in the Big Ten. But when you talk about pedigree, he also coached under George O'Leary, who's a very respected college coach, Ralph Friedgen in college as well, and then, of course, Bill Belichick in the pros. So this is a guy who has a wide variety of knowledge from a substantial coaching tree, not just Bill Belichick, but also Ralph Friedgen, also George O'Leary. So, I think one of the things that you saw and that I had heard and seen when he was a coach, and also talked to my friend John Harris about this, who knows him, he's a lot different. He's a lot different than most people from this city. And what I say by that was you could hear him start to get a little irritated by some of the questions. This is his introductory press conference.
Yeah, and thank you very much, by the way. I appreciated that very much. Yeah.
He's in, and it's his first press conference, and he's like, hey, thanks for having me. And he made his comment about Penn State, and some Penn State questions kept coming in. You could see, and he even said, well, that's about all I want to say about Penn State.
That, right.
He became very clear about it. But his actions and reactions showed you that, number one, he's going to be very different with the fans and with the media.
Oh, the anti-Kubiak.
Than Gary Kubiak, who was very polite, very Texas way of dealing with things like, I'm not going to try to embarrass you or make you look bad. I'm just going to tell you I've already answered the question in a very polite way. This is a guy who's going to be much more Northeastern. You're going to see that very curt, very aggressive side come out. And I'm fine with it. I'm okay. All that matters to me is that accountability.
I don't need to like you.
No.
Win football games.
Hey,
I don't need to like
you. Win the games. Win the games. And I think that leadership is missing on this team a little bit, Craig, to be honest with you. And I think he's going to start holding some people accountable and saying, I got to have you guys step up and lead this offense or this defense.
No doubt about it. My favorite thing coming out of the press conference took 24 hours to matriculate, but it was him saying, in response to questions being asked about the coaching staff and what direction he might go, and him saying, well, first things first is I'm going to meet with these guys here.
Right.
Then he gets up and fires everybody the next morning.
Yeah.
I love the hell.
But he wasn't going to tell anybody else.
That's Tony Soprano. He's just racking heads,
Yesterday
man.
afternoon, I was talking to a guy who's close to the Penn State program who told me, matter of factly, he said, yeah, O'Brien, I was talking to a guy on that staff, O'Brien's not keeping any of the Texans coaches. I'm like, oh, he's not? And I didn't figure he was. Most coaches don't keep guys on the old staff. And he goes, no, he's those coaches are all gone. He's going to meet with them tomorrow and tell them that. And I kind of figured that. And he was already getting his coaches together, but he's not going to say that at a press conference. Out of respect to those other coaches, I've also heard he's not going to have as many assistant coaches so that he can pay his coaches more. So I've heard some names. One of the names, a former New England Patriot, who will probably be on his staff. As a matter of fact, I've been asked not to say the name, but it's a recognizable name, who will be on the staff. There's someone coming, Kirk Ferentz's kid from Iowa. His name's already been leaked out there that he'll be coming. So supposedly he's going to have a young staff that's a very hungry staff. He's going to pay him well. He'll have fewer assistants. So that's kind of how he wants to approach this. He wants young, hungry guys who want to become the next head coaches as well, and he wants these guys to come up through his system. He wants his own, coaching tree.
I got a Mike Munchak question for you, but before I go to that, I want to get your thoughts on this particular thought of mine. For me, I thought that there was some level of awkwardness when Rick Smith, I'll say when he and Rick Smith had to address questions about each other. And it wasn't something that maybe everybody picked up on. Maybe I read too much into it. But, when Rick would refer to him as, this guy over here, well, you guys are not that chummy yet. You don't know each other. I mean, I've known you for years, really, you know what I mean? Yeah. And if we talking, and I go, well, this guy over here, But I just thought that was disingenuous, in my opinion. And I don't know how chummy their relationship would be. I think it'll be professional. But I would imagine that there are going to be some moments within the Texans' war room, I'll use that term, and I can imagine there will be some moments in there where it's going to be more challenging in different ways than it was with with Gary Kubiak around. And that's just a thought I had on that. I want to ask you a question. Now, Mike Munchak, Hall of Fame offensive lineman, head coach for the Tennessee Titans, played for the Oilers. You all know the backstory with that. Fired by Tennessee today. Give you some of the numbers on him before I make this comment. Titans have gone 9-7, 6-10, and 7-9 in the 3 seasons since Munchak replaced Jeff Fisher, and that's overall 22 and 26, and never took the team to the playoffs in either of his 3 years with the team. But I got to ask you this question. Before Bud Adams passed away last spring, he signed off on $100 million worth of free agents. Had Bud Adams not signed off on that, and maybe it was half that amount, does Munchak still have a job? That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I probably not, but because Bud Adams would have had to be the one deciding whether or not to pull the trigger. It's 3 years is the new 4 years, where it used to be coaches got 4 years. Well, now you're getting 3 years. You need to show something in 3 years, except for we've seen Bob McNair obviously goes longer than that or has in his last 2 hires. But now more and more teams are going 3 years and even less. I mean, there's organizations pulling the trigger a lot more quickly, which in some respects they're going to pay the price for that because they're not giving anyone a chance to establish what they need to get established. But with Munchak, one of those guys they spent a lot of money on was Andy Levitre, the guard that they brought over.
Right.
But they didn't dominate people on the ground. They didn't dominate with a running game. And I'll bring it back to the Texans having a
Chris Johnson, 200-yard rushing games this year?
I mean, that's what I was going to say. The guy they spent a bunch of money on, and it wasn't this year, it was several years back, was Chris Johnson. They gave him a contract, and he's never lived up to that contract after the 2,000-yard season. Mm-hmm. And that 2,000-yard season, by the way, was with Vince Young at quarterback and Jeff Fisher at head coach. That was a long time ago. And I think that's been more of a hindrance than anything is they've been trying to build around Chris Johnson for years. And he hasn't been the same, he hasn't been the same player over the last 3 years. And so let's go get Andy Levitre and spend a bunch of money on him. Let's go draft Chance Warmack, a right guard with the first pick. Let's do this. But they're not a dominant run team. So you look at their quarterback who they spent a first-round pick on 2-3 years ago, Jake Locker. He's never become the guy that they hoped he would become.
And I thought he would work. I didn't think it was – and I always – I got your take on that. And I always – when you have a take that completely differs from mine, I really pay attention to it.
But you know what I didn't like about him, Craig? He wasn't accurate in college. If you're not accurate
Accuracy is a problem, right, because you're throwing a wide open receiver.
Yeah, and a lot of shorter throws, too. That always bothered me.
Yeah, no, I was with you there. I just thought that God, Locker has so much heart. He got so much of the leadership attributes that you look for. I mean, he's a hard-nosed guy,
Yeah, he is.
He's got almost, line. We throw that term around every time we get a tough quarterback and compare him to a linebacker's mentality, but you get the cliche. And I just really thought that he was a kid that had all of the right type of work habits and things that I never thought he was going to be a great pocket passer. I just thought he was a guy that would grind it out. Hey, man, I grew up and I watched a guy like Jim McMahon win a Super Bowl. I've seen not great quarterbacks be successful. And I just thought Jake Locker would be a little bit better, have a little bit more success than he did. Mike Munchak, 2-20 record against teams that have finished seasons with winning records in his 3 years. And Tennessee made the same mistake that the Texans made, I thought, with Kubiak and Rick Smith, because you brought in too many people doing their job for the first time. You know what I mean? We've done some crazy things with this franchise. You brought in a defensive-minded head coach to take over the franchise when you first started the franchise, but you drafted a quarterback, but you didn't have a quarterback's coach. But you got a defensive-minded head coach. I mean, we've done some nutty things with this franchise. So hopefully the hiring of Bill O'Brien signifies the end of that situation. We're close up on a break, and what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cut it here because when we come back, we're going to get more into the Texans. We're going to talk about Wade Phillips and the firing of Wade Phillips, and we'll transition that and segue that into conversation about the name that we're hearing, Romeo Crennel joining the Texans as the defensive coordinator. And we're gonna dig in on Lance for a little bit of that expertise in understanding and try to break down and explain to you folks a little bit about the different types of 3-4 defenses from Wade Phillips to what you're actually going to see from Romeo Crennel, and we'll just see what type of success the Texans have with that, all right? This is H&W Sports Talk Live. We're going to jump out and run to a break, and when we come back, it'll be more Texans Talk right here with Lance and Craig.